Joining us is Vyacheslav Maltsev, a Russian opposition figure. Vyacheslav, hello. Great to see you again.
Hello there.
Well, let's talk about this attack on St. Petersburg, which was symbolic on the day the forum opened, where Putin was supposed to speak. What could this mean for his personal, I don't know, sense of self or security concerns? Well, we've already discussed more than once that Putin is absolutely terrified of an attack on his life, right? And in fact, electronic warfare systems have already been seen more than once in his motorcade, following the Kremlin dictator around. Please tell us, did things like this actually scare him personally? Or is it possible that, I don't know, they might not even report it to him so he doesn't get unnecessarily frightened? What do you think about that?
Well, let's not start with that. So let's start with what this actually was and exactly why it was done. I mean, it really seems like everyone thinks they already know why this was done. Actually, I am quite certain that only a very small minority of people actually know the real reason why this was done. And a major forum is really being held right now where more than 20,000 enthusiastic people have traveled to attend from all over the world, including many people from Germany, such as those from the Alternative for Germany party. A great number of people came over from Europe, and these are individuals whose overall mood, to put it quite mildly, is deeply defeatist, closely connected to upcoming future events across Europe. In other words, they think that under no circumstances should you anger Putin. You need to appease him. You need to make a deal with him. He gives good bribes and all that sort of thing. And for those people, it's clear they probably don't watch those various independent internet news channels that show exactly how Ukraine is successfully hitting Putin's invading troops. They watch thumbnails, but here they saw all of this firsthand. There was a little strike, yeah, that was carried out. And on top of everything else, you see, it's important to note that the strike was delivered on specific strategic targets directly associated with the Baltic Fleet. The Baltic Fleet is that specialized military combat unit, so to speak, that strategic tactical formation, which will actively participate in the war for the various Baltic nations. And the Baltic Fleet is very important. And a successful precision strike against a strategic asset of this fleet kind of hints that this fleet could also potentially face total annihilation and cease to exist entirely, just like the Black Sea Fleet did, yeah. Regardless of the fact that it's located in a completely different sea, one that does not share a direct land or maritime border with Ukraine. And this is exactly a clear hint to Putin. Now we'll see exactly how he chooses to respond to this escalation. So, this is a Chinese stratagem: hit the grass to scare the snake. What actions will he take? If he's really preparing for war with the Baltic countries, and he actually is preparing for this war, then those will be one set of actions. And now we're going to keep track of that. If he's not preparing for war with the three Baltic nations, which I don't believe, because I'm absolutely 100% certain he's fully prepared and ready for war with Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania right now, then his actions would be completely different. So, right now, based specifically on his own actions and on what his commanders on the ground will do, in particular, the head of the Leningrad military district, as well as the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, on what the Air Force will do and on what the air defense systems will do, which have been very massively concentrated there as part of the Sixth Guards Army. This unit hasn't actually fired a single shot yet, but it already received the prestigious title of Guards back in January. Oh, I mean in December, on the 20th, just about 6 months ago. So, right now, this entire situation is, so to speak, a definitive litmus test. But I am absolutely sure that this is a very good sign for us. In other words, it means that our friends in the West have finally realized that Putin is preparing for aggression in the Baltic countries, and now they started monitoring the situation. And that's really great. Up until this point in time, we hadn't seen a single sign that they were taking this situation seriously or showing any real concern, even a little bit. This situation indirectly demonstrates to us, yes, that it's not for nothing. As you saw, the person commanding the drone army in Ukraine wrote extensively about effectively closing the long standing window to Europe. That's a very specific hint. No, it's not just words about Peter opening a window to Europe or cutting through and so on. No, this is an incredibly clear and direct hint. And you specifically asked me whether Putin is afraid. Of course he is deeply afraid. And but of course, people constantly assure him that he can't be bombed by drones. He's got electronic warfare systems and some machine gunners and whatever else you can imagine. I think he doesn't believe it, just like he doesn't believe anything else. He's a pretty distrustful guy. His extensive time working in the KGB is exactly what taught him that lesson. And honestly, it's really hard to protect yourself. Look, just think back to about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, starting exactly from March 1st and continuing all the way up until, well, the latest info we have is from the 20th. They were actively conducting these intensive air defense drills on the naval ships stationed in Kronstadt, right there on the decks of the ships themselves. They were actually actively towing and pulling the ships out into the waters of the Gulf of Finland, systematically relocating them to the strategic naval port of Lomonosov. So basically, there was always some kind of constant movement going on there. Some of the ships were moved to Baltyask and various locations throughout the Leningrad region and other similar destinations across the area. So we can see that they, the Putin people, were kind of expecting there would be problems because, let me emphasize again, starting from March, from the very beginning of the month, on all the ships of the Baltic Fleet, no matter what condition they were in, whether they were at sea, in port, or even practically in permanent dock, everywhere, they were carrying out anti-air measures everywhere. People responsible have been appointed. In addition to those already in charge of air defense, there are now also people specifically responsible for these measures and for the defense itself. Even if it's just some modest little vessel, right? And there's really absolutely no specialized air defense systems except for a single mounted machine gun. Still, the entire crew goes through comprehensive military training courses. So they're pulled out for this without being taken off duty, so to speak. But on shore, they go through specialized training programs, and now that's happening all over the place for them. But as you can see, all of this is very ineffective. And this attack proved that it's completely and utterly ineffective. So we'll just have to wait and see what exactly happens next. So now the ball is really in Putin's court. What are they actually going to do, right? So I personally think that in a potential war in the Baltic countries, they're definitely relying much more on the Northern Fleet than on the Baltic Fleet, right? So now we see that on the first of the month, they finally sent out the massive Admiral Nakhimov and are supposedly conducting extensive sea trials right now. But these aren't actually real sea trials. There's nothing left to test there. It runs just fine. About 18 months ago, they started up the reactors. The nuclear reactor was successfully commissioned, and overall, everything works exceptionally well. They are going to conduct some extensive live fire training exercises and naval drills in that area. And at this point, I really do not think that the nuclear powered cruiser Admiral Nakhimov will be returning to the shipyard in Severodvinsk anytime soon. So basically, it's already part of the fleet. All that's left is to ceremoniously raise the flag. You can easily do that from just about anywhere you happen to be, and then immediately head off to engage in a fight wherever you want. So, in order to effectively intimidate some of those European countries, well, they are going to need some real powerful naval ships, right? They definitely won't be able to rely on the ones that are currently just sitting idle in the harbor at Kronstadt. But still, this attack demonstrated to the entire international community that the Putin regime is fundamentally incapable of even defending its own territory on a day as significant as the opening of this forum, proving that they are essentially powerless and unable to respond effectively to such threats.
Vyacheslav, there's something else I want to ask you. In general, these intensified attacks on Russian military industrial facilities and the oil industry, which just keep coming, including the current cutting off of the land corridor to Crimea along the so-called Novorossiya Highway, as the Kremlin regime calls it, does this lead the Kremlin to any kind of realization that no matter how much they want it, sooner or later they'll have to abandon their plan to seize Ukraine? Let me ask from a bit of a distance.
Of course, this causes enormous damage to Putin's people. But Russia's a big country. Not everything can reach everywhere, and partisans can't operate everywhere either. So, in terms of its impact on the entire Putin economy, it's a significant and serious influence, but it's not fatal. In other words, Putin's economy is currently operating on what you might call a war footing. Putin's people have stepped up their fight against theft, locking up just about everyone. And that was the main problem, much scarier than the attacks by Ukrainian drones. The theft was happening internally because everything was being stolen down to the last penny. Now, somehow, this is being cracked down on, more or less. Maybe it can't be stopped completely because the corruption of this regime is the regime itself. It's kleptocratic by nature. So it's impossible to stamp it out entirely, but it can be limited to some extent. And then, as a result, huge amounts of money are suddenly freed up, money that is not being destroyed by drones. So Putin's people are in a difficult position where they have to make some very tough decisions, whether to attack the Baltic countries, which are completely unprotected, really, and take them over, and then start negotiating seriously with the West, or not negotiate at all and just continue to act tough and so on. I think they have already completely made up their minds about this. But actions like the attack in Kronstadt could push back the timing of an invasion. Seriously. Why? Because, well, they're counting on something. They have a comprehensive list of ships, planes, submarines, various military units, elite special forces, and so on and so forth. If that list suddenly begins to shrink and get significantly shorter, and it can only get shorter thanks to the direct actions of the Ukrainian army, then you see the timing of a potential attack on the Baltic countries will keep getting delayed and pushed further back into the future. Yeah, postponed. Because, well, it is important to note that military leaders aren't used to taking such heavy losses before even starting an aggressive war. So they'll try to find a way to compensate for and replace those specific losses with something else entirely. And that's exactly what we're going to watch for. Right now, if there's a big commotion, they'll start scrambling, transferring people, hiding some, bringing in reinforcements, strengthening their positions. But I'm not going to say what exactly they need to do. We'll be watching this very closely. With some sites, we're going to be incredibly attentive. And if we see any corresponding movements there, if something happens, then everything will become clear. So I think right now it's really, of course, absolutely crucial to recognize and deeply understand that Putin's Russia is a massive, sprawling nation with truly enormous resources. There are a lot of misguided individuals there who can be sent to the front lines, and there are still plenty of manufacturing capacities and people willing to work for mere pennies, making drones and weapons to kill Ukrainians, and really so that their own children die as well, and so on. So, right now, we're going to, let's say, very closely monitor the unfolding situation as it develops, and of course, actively take part. I think that the partisans will also be greatly inspired by these significant actions that are taking place right now across the region. Russia is tense. Russia understands that everything should end in the fall, and not because of Ukraine's victory or anything like that, but because of an uprising in Russia itself. In other words, everyone is expecting a revolution. Everyone is expecting an uprising. It's a shame that there's no help for this uprising from anyone, not from Ukraine, not from the West, no one. So, as they often say in these situations, we are going to have to act entirely at our own risk. And of course, it really would be so much better if there was some kind of external support available to us, because then maybe we wouldn't actually have to send these drones out there at all.
Vyacheslav, here's something else I want to ask you. It seems like Putin has now ordered to cut expenses in order to find new funding for the war. And this is about his current meeting with the Ministry of Finance. And here I'm reading a news story about how the Academy of Sciences is suggesting to Putin that he cut spending on pensioners to balance the budget and make everything fine. What do you think? Obviously, we can't make an economic forecast, but still, how much longer do these tools for cutting expenses within Russia have left? Up to what point? Up to what stage will Putin keep taking money from Russians? And does that stage even exist?
As long as Vladimir Putin exists, there is always going to be the possibility that he'll keep extracting wealth from the Russian people. As long as people stay silent, as long as they remain slaves to the state, that's how it'll be. It'll get to the point where they're down to just 125 grams of bread, and then they'll all just die off, and that'll be the end of it. So, of course, Putin does have a serious dilemma to deal with at the moment. So, on the one hand, you need to somehow motivate people to fight, but on the other hand, you're taking everything away from them. In other words, you can't do both at the same time. Take everything and send them off to fight. That probably won't work. That's exactly why he has to carefully maneuver his way through. That's why he needs all those economists and other untrustworthy scumbags who've gathered around him to advise him on how to make the whole situation look a lot better. Take, for instance, the specific piece of legislation recently introduced that provides for the complete forgiveness of outstanding financial debts totaling up to 10 million rubles, provided that you agree to sign a formal contract to serve in the military forces under the command of the Russian Federation starting from the 1st of May. So there is a staggering and overwhelming number of debtors, and due to these incredibly difficult financial circumstances, it is only natural that they will want to enlist in the military ranks to seek a better life. As we have noted before, Vladimir Putin currently has a vast pool of personnel at his disposal, but he still needs to recruit many more troops if he truly intends to launch a major military offensive within the Baltic countries.
I would also like to clarify one additional point with you. Germany has just officially approved the idea of initiating formal diplomatic negotiations with Putin. I want to discuss this topic with you, but friends, so you don't miss our upcoming streams, please subscribe to the Unanian channel. Our team always prepares fresh episodes for you. Don't forget, it's important. So, Vyacheslav, should we even talk to Putin? Right now, a window for dialogue is opening from the European side with Russia on the topic of Ukraine. Reuters reports this, citing officials from the German government. And this Euro trio, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, will now play a key role in this process. Do you believe that it's possible to reach any kind of agreement with Putin through dialogue?
No, of course you can't make any deals with Putin. He is malevolent, a bringer of harm, and his path is the path of evil. He will only be able to negotiate when he sees that he has been completely defeated. And for him, an agreement will just be a way to save himself, nothing more. Right now, he doesn't see that he's been completely defeated, so he'll keep deceiving, bluffing, and of course, he won't agree to anything good. To put it in another way, he will try to use these negotiations to move from a difficult and unfavorable situation to a much better one, or from a good situation to an even more advantageous one. I honestly find it difficult to understand, why does Europe even need this right now? As I have already mentioned, there are currently a wide variety of effective methods to make sure that Putin has absolutely no options left. I mean, there is a major conflict unfolding right now. In war, absolutely anything can happen, especially since even the international laws of armed conflict are currently in effect. But in reality, there are no laws at all, right? So by utilizing Ukrainian hands, the resistance, or any available person or resource, you can make it so that both Putin and his entire regime are completely removed from power, and so on. But instead, they're trying to negotiate with their beloved. That's the position of the weak, first of all. It's a fundamentally weak position, and with it, they'll accumulate a massive amount of negatives and not a single positive. If they think they can negotiate a favorable deal with Putin and he'll pardon them, he won't pardon them.
Got it. Thank you so much. And let's finish up with a question about Shoigu. Once again, there are reports that he, among others, is on the verge of having a criminal case opened against him, right? Last week, we discussed the case where one of his deputies had assets worth 5.5 billion rubles seized. Or rather, they arrested him. Are they deliberately going after Shoigu, or is there actually a reason?
Well, Shoigu is a notoriously and deeply corrupt person, a convicted criminal.
But is that really a reason for Putin to destroy him?
That's no, I mean, is there a reason? When you examine the situation from Putin's own perspective, then yes, there is a clear reason. Shoigu is the one who ultimately lost the war in Ukraine. Shoigu consistently provided Putin with false information. Now, Putin holds him personally responsible for losing to Ukraine. You get what I mean, right? I mean, when he was planning out this entire war, he definitely asked Shoigu. And basically, Shoigu and Gerasimov, those high ranking guys, were in the loop, while the rest of them were completely left in the dark about it. If you take Patrushev, remember back on the 22nd day of February 2022, when the Security Council met, the war was already practically on, and he was just sitting there spouting complete nonsense. Narishkin and Patrushev, they hadn't been informed or briefed about the actual start of the war at all, right? Only the military knew, and even then, only the top brass. The rest thought they were just running drills. And of course, Putin personally has a lot of complaints about Shoigu. Yeah, and Putin's inner circle has even more. For many reasons, he can't touch it. First of all, Shoigu is an agent of Chinese influence, probably the best among Russian politicians, a friend of Xi Jinping. Yeah, and it's no coincidence that he was the first to personally congratulate Xi Jinping. He flew there himself right after Xi was appointed in 2013. She was appointed in March on the 13th or 14th, and by the 22nd, Shoigu was already in Beijing congratulating him. And Shoigu's been working with the Chinese for a long time, working for the Chinese, and they basically support him. That's absolutely obvious. But he's a weak figure and has always been a weak figure. I mean, to really begin to understand that Shoigu is a fundamentally weak figure, you just need to spend some time, like a minute, two or three, right there in his presence. I honestly have no idea how anyone could have promoted such an idiot. I clearly remember way back in the 90s when he came to the city of Saratov to deal with that major Skala Mountain issue, specifically the landslide zone, where they urgently needed to clear out all those old poplars. Well, I have to say, no one has done anything to this day, even though 30 years have passed. So Shoigu came, and as for me, I was the deputy chairman of the Duma back then, and the chairman asked me, he said, "Go there, just be present." I said, "Why don't you go to hell, you idiot?" Well, I went anyway. All right, so I showed up. This guy was just sitting there, right up on a main stage, and I slowly made my way over there to him. He looked incredibly serious, but you could easily smell the booze on him from a mile away, just absolutely reeking of alcohol. He started spouting some nonsense. I just got up right in the middle of the whole event and walked out. I thought, shit, why should I sit there with these idiots and ask the chairman anything? So, did you go? I said, yeah, I went. So what? I said. There's just some drunk guys sitting there, seriously, talking nonsense to us about this, about the Scholar Mountain. I said, I decided, just so I wouldn't burst out laughing, to just leave. He said, well, maybe that's for the best. So this is just to tell you, like, now I hate Shoigu for the war, for this, for that. Back then, I didn't feel any of that. This was 1997. Can you imagine? I mean, there was nothing, nothing at all. And I had no idea he was a Chinese spy. And honestly, I just didn't care about any of it. But you could really feel the presence of such an unserious person, you know? I mean, you see him sitting there reeking of booze, just some idiot, right? Who put on this half military outfit because he likes it, and he's spouting off some totally crazy stuff, you know? Actually, if we have just a quick second right now, I would really love to tell you another quite interesting thing that I found out about Shoigu. You might recall a moment from a few years ago. This was well before the current conflict ever began, when Sergei Shoigu went on an official inspection of the Ryazan Academy. During his visit, they were showcasing a wide range of specialized equipment for combat divers right there in the facility's training pool. and he was walking around checking everything out, acting like he actually understood any of it. And so he started grabbing this equipment and talking to the developer. And there was this old man who started yelling out loud, almost cursing. This was on TV about the weight of this equipment, the underwater gear. Can you imagine? The weight of the underwater equipment. It's just absurd. Yeah, it should be lighter. But the guy got flustered because he didn't understand, what does the weight of underwater equipment matter if it's supposed to have neutral buoyancy, right? So for him, it was just something unimaginable. Like they were telling him complete nonsense. And this old man says, yeah, yeah. Well, he can't just say, listen, you're an idiot and you don't know anything about this. But these are such basic things. And yet, they've always been obvious, and all this ignorance, this nonsense. Yeah, this lack of knowledge, it's presented to Putin's supporters as some kind of truth. So he's this kind of hero, a smart guy, like a Brahmin. He said things that no one knew before him.